Hello everyone, welcome to the Mysterious Stories channel, where you'll discover the most mysterious, scary, and fascinating stories. Make sure to turn up the volume and get ready for a spine-chilling experience you won't forget. The story begins with Corporal Ethan Graves and his squad, stationed near a desolate village in the heart of Iraq. The area had been declared abandoned for years, left as a skeleton of war. Yet, whispers of strange occurrences in the village had reached their ears, unexplainable laughter and shadowy figures spotted by other units. Tasked with investigating the site after reports of insurgent activity, Ethan's team of 6 soldiers prepared for what they thought would be a routine mission. Under the relentless heat of the Iraqi sun, the squad marched through barren landscapes, the silence broken only by the crunch of boots on gravel. Ethan, a seasoned soldier, noticed the unusual tension among his men. Private Lucas, the youngest in the group, seemed particularly uneasy. "I heard stories," Lucas muttered, his voice barely audible over the dry wind. "This village people say it's cursed." "Cut it out, kid," snapped Sergeant Diaz. "Focus on the mission. No such thing as curses." Still, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The barren road seemed to quiet. No birds, no insects, just the oppressive silence pressing down on them like a weight. As the squad entered the village, a chilling breeze swept through the empty streets, kicking up dust. The houses were mere husks of their former selves, broken windows, crumbling walls, and remnants of lives long forgotten. It was Lucas who spotted them first. "Hey, over there," he whispered, pointing to a group of children playing near a collapsed building. They appeared out of place, their laughter oddly cheerful amidst the devastation. Ethan squinted, trying to make sense of it. The children seemed unbothered by the presence of armed soldiers. "Kids, here," Sergeant Diaz muttered, his brows furrowed. "That doesn't make sense." Ethan raised a hand to signal silence. The squad approached cautiously, their rifles lowered but ready. As they drew closer, the laughter abruptly stopped. One by one, the children turned to face them, their expressions blank, almost to calm. Then, without warning, they scattered into the shadows of the ruins, disappearing from sight. "Where did they go?" Lucas's voice cracked as he darted toward the building. Ethan grabbed his shoulder to hold him back. "Stay close. No splitting up," Ethan commanded firmly. They searched the immediate area, but found no sign of the children. It was as if they had melted into the air. The only thing left was the echo of faint, eerie laughter, carried by the wind. As dusk fell, the squad decided to set up a temporary outpost in the village, hoping to regroup and radio for further instructions. Ethan felt the unease settling in his chest as he kept watch. The silence of the night was interrupted by a sound, a soft, melodic hum, like a lullaby. It came from nowhere and everywhere at once. Lucas clutched his rifle tightly, his eyes wide with fear. "Who's there?" Ethan shouted into the dark, his voice steady, but his grip on the rifle firm. No response came, only the haunting hum growing louder, followed by the faint sound of children's laughter echoing through the village. Ethan's instinct screamed danger. He turned to Sergeant Diaz, whose face was pale. "This isn't normal," Diaz admitted under his breath. Suddenly, Private Lucas pointed toward a crumbled house. "There," he shouted, his voice trembling. Ethan followed his gaze and froze. A single child stood in the doorway, staring directly at them. The child's eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight, and a sinister smile curled on their lips. The figure took a step forward, and Ethan's blood ran cold. The faint glow in the child's eyes sent shivers down Ethan's spine. The squad, tense and silent, pointed their weapons at the figure in the doorway. The child didn't flinch, only stared, as if studying them. Then, without a sound, the figure stepped back into the shadows and vanished. "Did you see that?" Lucas whispered, his voice shaking. "Stay focused," Ethan ordered, though his own nerves were frayed. "We'll sweep the area." Sergeant Diaz signaled for the team to fan out but keep close. They moved cautiously toward the building where the child had disappeared, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The ruin was eerily quiet, save for the crunch of their boots on rubble. Inside, they found nothing but broken furniture and dusty walls. No signs of anyone. "This doesn't make sense," muttered Private Johnson. "We all saw that kid." Lucas froze near a shattered window. "Ethan," he whispered, pointing outside. In the dim moonlight, silhouettes of children were visible again, running, laughing, darting in and out of buildings. As the squad regrouped outside, Corporal Ethan noticed something unusual near a collapsed wall, a cluster of small footprints pressed into the dirt. They were fresh. "These prints are too clear," he muttered, crouching to examine them. "It's like they were just here." "They're toying with us," Diaz growled. "This isn't normal." Lucas stepped closer. "What if they're not kids? What if there's something else?" Before anyone could answer, a sharp, chilling giggle echoed through the air, making them all whirl around. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere. The squad tightened their formation as the laughter grew louder, more distorted. Then, one by one, small stones began to fall from the ruined buildings, seemingly thrown by invisible hands. "Take cover," Diaz barked, as larger debris started to fall. Ethan ducked behind a crumbled wall, his heart racing. He peered over and saw one of the children standing on the roof of a nearby building, their face obscured by shadow. The figure raised an arm, and a gust of cold wind swept through the village, snuffing out their flashlights. In the pitch black, chaos erupted. "Stay together," Ethan shouted, his voice barely cutting through the cacophony of unsettling noises, whispers, giggles, and faint cries. Lucas clung to his rifle, his breathing erratic. "Ethan, something touched me," he yelled, spinning in circles. "I said stay calm," Ethan snapped, though he himself was gripping his weapon tightly. A dim, unnatural light flickered from the center of the village. Ethan and Diaz exchanged a glance, then signaled the squad to move toward it. As they approached, the light revealed a horrifying sight: a circle of small skeletons, neatly arranged around a burned, blackened doll. What the hell is this?" Johnson stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. Diaz knelt cautiously, examining the scene. "Looks like some kind of ritual or a warning." Ethan felt the air grow heavy, pressing against his chest. The laughter had stopped, replaced by a low, ominous hum that seemed to vibrate through the ground. Suddenly, one of the skeletons shifted, its tiny jaw opening as if to scream. A deep, guttural sound erupted from it, freezing the squad in place. The oppressive hum grew louder, and the ground beneath them began to tremble. Ethan shouted, "Fall back, now!" The squad scrambled, but as they retreated, shadows began to close in around them, moving unnaturally fast. The last thing Ethan saw before they reached the edge of the village was a child's glowing eyes watching him from the rubble, filled with malice and something worse, hunger. The cursed village wasn't done with them yet. The squad reached the outskirts of the village, their breathing ragged and their nerves frayed. But as they pressed forward, they realized something was wrong. The terrain around them no longer matched the map. The village, which they should have left behind, still loomed in the shadows. Ethan checked his compass under the dim light of his flashlight. The needle spun wildly. "It's broken," he muttered, shaking it in frustration. Diaz growled, "No way, we follow the exact route. This shouldn't. Look." Lucas pointed back, his voice trembling. The burned-out house where they first saw the children was directly behind them. Despite walking for almost an hour, they hadn't left the village at all. "That's not possible," Johnson stammered. Ethan gritted his teeth. "Stay calm, we'll regroup and figure this out." As they debated their next steps, a faint scratching sound echoed from the darkness. Ethan's flashlight flickered. "Who's there?" he called out, raising his rifle. The scratching grew louder, like nails dragging across stone. The squad formed a defensive circle, their weapons aimed outward. The shadows around them seemed to pulse, shifting closer. Lucas cursed under his breath. I saw something move. Where? Ethan asked, scanning the darkness. Everywhere, Lucas whispered, his voice barely audible. A small, shadowy figure darted past them, its outline just visible in the flickering light. Then another, and another. The squad was surrounded? Soft whispers filled the air, overlapping in an incomprehensible cacophony. Ethan strained to make sense of the words, but they were in a language he didn't understand. Johnson's voice broke the tension. I'm not staying here. I'm going back to the village. That's suicide. Diaz barked. But Johnson was already walking away, his rifle slung over his shoulder. The squad watched, helpless, as he disappeared into the darkness. Moments later, a blood-curdling scream shattered the silence. Johnson, Ethan shouted, breaking formation to run after him. No, stay together, Diaz yelled, grabbing Ethan's arm. From the darkness, Johnson stumbled back into view, his face pale and his eyes wide with terror. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Before anyone could reach him, an unseen force yanked him back into the shadows. The squad opened fire, their bullets tearing through the night, but there was nothing to hit. Cease fire, Diaz ordered, but the damage was done. The echoes of their gunfire faded, replaced by laughter childlike and cruel. Retreating to the nearest shelter, the squad barricaded themselves inside a crumbling house. Ethan slumped against the wall, his heart pounding. We're being hunted, Lucas said, his voice shaking. And they're playing with us. Diaz, ever the pragmatist, began checking their gear. We need to regroup and find a way out of this hellhole. Ethan noticed something on the floor, a set of small, muddy footprints leading to a corner of the room. He followed them, his flashlight trembling in his grip. In the corner sat a single doll, its face scorched and its eyes hollow. As Ethan reached for it, the doll's head turned on its own, its hollow eyes locking onto his ... Ethan recoiled, dropping his flashlight. In the sudden darkness, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. The squad's lights flickered back on, revealing that the doll was now gone. They're inside, Lucas whispered, his voice trembling. A faint giggle echoed from behind them. Ethan turned slowly, his blood running cold. Standing in the doorway was a child, its face twisted in an expression that was anything but human. The child raised a hand, and the room plunged into darkness. Darkness enveloped the squad as the child in the doorway disappeared, leaving only its malevolent presence lingering in the air. Ethan felt his breath hitch, his hands shaking as he fumbled to relight his flashlight. We need to get out of here, Lucas shouted, his voice breaking. Diaz grabbed him by the collar. And go where? We're stuck in this nightmare, and running blind will only get us killed. The squad fell silent, the oppressive quiet broken only by the faint, rhythmic sound of footsteps, small, unhurried, and growing closer. Ethan's flashlight finally flickered back on, illuminating the room. The muddy footprints that had led to the corner were now scattered, as though dozens of small feet had been pacing around them. We need to break the loop, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. If we stay here, we're done for. Diaz nodded reluctantly. We stick together. No one goes off alone. We'll head east. The map says there's open ground that way. But the compass, Lucas began. We use the stars. Diaz cut him off. It's better than sitting here waiting to die. The squad moved cautiously through the village, their flashlights casting long, jagged shadows on the crumbling walls. The whispers followed them, growing louder with every step. As they passed the remnants of a schoolhouse, Ethan froze. Inside, through the broken windows, he saw movement, children running and playing as though the village were alive again. Do you see that? He whispered. Diaz shook his head. Eyes forward. Don't let them distract you. But Ethan couldn't look away. The children weren't just playing, they were reenacting something. A group gathered in a circle, their faces contorted in silent screams as they pointed toward a shadowy figure standing in the center. Ethan stepped closer, his flashlight trembling in his grip. The figure in the center turned its head slowly, its face obscured by darkness. Suddenly, the children all stopped and turned to look at him, their empty eyes glinting in the light. "Ethan, move," Diaz barked, yanking him back. The moment Ethan turned away, a high-pitched laugh echoed from the schoolhouse, followed by the sound of glass shattering. The squad quickened their pace, their breaths coming in short, panicked bursts. The whispers became voices, distinct and mocking. "Turn around," one said, its tone sweet and innocent. "Come play with us," another chimed in, giggling. Lucas stumbled, his flashlight falling from his grip. "I can't do this," he sobbed. "I can't." Before anyone could stop him, Lucas broke into a sprint, disappearing into the shadows. "Lucas, no!" Ethan shouted, running after him. They found his flashlight lying in the dirt, still flickering. Of Lucas, there was no sign. Instead, small footprints surrounded the light, leading deeper into the village. Diaz cursed under his breath. "We can't afford to lose anyone else. Keep moving." Ethan hesitated, his gut telling him to follow the footprints. "We can't just leave him." Diaz grabbed Ethan by the arm. "Do you want to end up like him?" Lucas made his choice. As they pressed on, they passed a charred sign with faded lettering. Ethan wiped the soot away to reveal the name of the village. "It says Home of the Lost," Ethan whispered, a chill running down his spine. Diaz glanced at it, his face grim. "It's not just a name. This place is trying to claim us." The squad reached the edge of the village, where the trees of the jungle loomed like silent sentinels. Ethan looked back, his heart sinking as he saw the flickering lights of the village still behind them. "How?" he whispered. "We've been walking for hours." Before anyone could answer, the sound of children's laughter erupted around them, loud and mocking. Figures darted between the trees, their forms just out of focus. Ethan raised his weapon, but Diaz pushed it down. "Bullets won't save us. Stay calm." The laughter stopped, replaced by a single voice, a child's voice, soft and chilling. "You can't leave. You belong to us now." The jungle loomed ahead like a wall of darkness, yet it felt safer than the haunted village behind them. Ethan, Diaz, and Torres pressed forward, their breaths shallow and their nerves frayed. The mocking laughter of the children had faded, replaced by an oppressive silence. "Where are we?" Torres muttered, gripping his rifle tightly. Diaz glanced at the map, though he already knew it was useless. "Doesn't matter. Just keep moving." As they entered the jungle, the air grew heavier, the thick canopy above blocking even the faintest starlight. Every step seemed to echo, as though the forest itself was listening. Ethan stopped suddenly. "Do you hear that?" The others froze, straining to listen. At first, there was nothing then a faint, rhythmic tapping, like a child's fingers drumming against wood. "It's them," Diaz said, his voice tight. "Keep your eyes forward. Don't stop." The sound grew louder, joined by the rustling of leaves. Shadows flitted between the trees, darting just out of sight. The group stumbled upon a clearing, where a single tree stood, gnarled and ancient. Hanging from its branches were dozens of small, crude dolls made from sticks and vines. Each doll had a face carved into it, twisted, agonized expressions that seemed to watch them. What is this?" Torres whispered, his voice trembling. Ethan stepped closer, his flashlight catching something shiny on one of the dolls. He recoiled as he realized what it was. Lucas's dog tags. "Lucas," he murmured, his heart sinking. Before they could react, the air turned icy. The dolls began to sway, though there was no wind. A faint giggle echoed through the clearing, followed by a child's voice. "Do you like our toys?" Without warning, the ground beneath them shifted. Vines erupted from the earth, snaking around their boots and pulling them toward the tree. "Move! Get out of here!" Diaz shouted, firing his weapon at the writhing plants. The bullets seemed to do nothing. The vines tightened their grip, dragging Torres to his knees. He screamed, clawing at the ground as the dolls above began to sway faster, their carved faces distorting into wicked grins. Ethan lunged forward, slicing at the vines with his knife. "Hold on, Torres!" With a desperate tug, he freed Torres, and the two scrambled back as Diaz unloaded the last of his ammunition into the tree. The vines recoiled, retreating into the ground, but the eerie laughter persisted. The squad pushed deeper into the jungle, their pace frantic. Ethan looked over his shoulder, expecting to see the tree chasing them, but it remained in the clearing, its sinister dolls watching silently. As they ran, a faint light appeared ahead, firelight flickering through the trees. Hope surged in Ethan's chest. It might be a camp. They burst into another clearing, only to find a ring of candles surrounding a single figure, Lucas. He stood motionless, his eyes blank, his face pale. Around him, the phantom children danced, their voices chanting in a language none of the soldiers recognized. "Lucas!" Ethan shouted, stepping forward. Diaz grabbed his arm. "Don't. It's not him anymore." The children stopped their dance, turning in unison to face the squad. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and their faces twisted into grotesque smiles. "Stay with us," one of them said, its voice echoing strangely. "We'll make you one of our toys." Torres raised his rifle, but Diaz pushed it down. "Weapons won't work. We have to outthink them." Ethan's mind raced. The fire. Maybe it's holding them here. Without waiting for approval, he lunged forward, kicking over one of the candles. The flame extinguished, and the child nearest to it let out a shriek, dissolving into a wisp of smoke. "That's it. Put out the fire," Diaz shouted. The squad moved quickly, kicking over candles and dodging the children, who lunged at them with clawed hands. One by one, the flames died, and the children's forms flickered and vanished. When the last candle was extinguished, the clearing fell silent. Lucas's body collapsed to the ground, lifeless and empty. Ethan knelt beside him, tears streaming down his face. "We were too late," he whispered. Diaz placed a hand on his shoulder. "We need to move. This place isn't done with us yet." As they turned to leave, a cold wind swept through the jungle, carrying with it a familiar, chilling laugh. "You can't escape," the voice whispered. "You're already ours." The squad trudged through the jungle, their spirits fractured and their nerves shredded. Ethan, Torres, and Diaz moved in silence, the weight of Lucas's lifeless body now added to their struggle. Each step forward felt like dragging themselves deeper into a nightmare they couldn't escape. As they pressed on, the jungle seemed to close in tighter, the trees twisting and warping into unnatural shapes. The air turned thick, and the oppressive silence was broken only by faint whispers in the distance, childlike voices calling their names. "Ethan, Torres, Diaz." Diaz stopped abruptly. "They know us," he said through gritted teeth. "They've always known us." Ethan's flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the warped foliage. "We need to keep moving. The chopper is coming. If we stop now, we're dead." The others nodded, though none of them believed they would truly escape. The squad reached a rickety wooden bridge spanning a deep ravine. It creaked ominously under the weight of their boots, but there was no other path forward. One at a time, Diaz ordered, stepping onto the bridge first. As he crossed, the jungle behind them erupted into noise, laughter, screams, and the rustling of leaves as something barreled toward them. "Hurry!" Ethan shouted, shoving Torres forward. Midway across, the bridge swayed violently. Ethan turned to see shadows gathering at the edge of the jungle, dozens of children, their glowing eyes piercing through the darkness. "You can't leave," one of them shrieked, its voice rising into a banshee wail. The figures surged forward, their forms blurring and elongating into monstrous shapes. Torres reached the other side first, followed by Diaz. Ethan was halfway across when the bridge jolted violently. He turned to see one of the creatures clinging to the ropes, its distorted face inches from his own. "Go," Diaz shouted, drawing his knife. Ethan hesitated. "What are you doing?" "Just go." Diaz slashed at the ropes, severing one side of the bridge. The structure swung violently, throwing the creature into the ravine. Diaz grinned grimly. "I'll buy you time." Before Ethan could argue, Diaz cut the last rope holding the bridge in place. The wooden planks and Diaz plummeted into the darkness below, leaving Ethan and Torres staring in stunned silence. The faint sound of rotor blades broke the silence. Ethan and Torres scrambled up a rocky slope, emerging into a clearing where a chopper was descending. Its searchlight illuminated the jungle, casting long, shifting shadows. "We're here," Ethan waved desperately, his voice hoarse. The two stumbled toward the chopper, but as they neared, the children appeared again, emerging from the jungle like wraiths. Their forms flickered between human and monstrous, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of mockery and rage. "You don't belong here. You'll never leave. Stay with us forever." Torres fired wildly, his bullets passing through the phantoms without effect. Ethan grabbed a flare from his pack, lighting it and waving it at the approaching figures. The bright red light seemed to hold them at bay, but only for a moment. As the creatures closed in, the chopper's machine gun roared to life, tearing through the jungle. The phantoms recoiled, their forms dissolving into smoke, but their voices persisted. "You'll never escape." Ethan and Torres clambered aboard the chopper, collapsing into the seats as the door slammed shut. The pilot, a grizzled veteran, glanced back at them. "You boys look like you've seen hell," he said, lifting the chopper into the air. As the chopper ascended, Ethan looked down at the jungle. The clearing where Lucas had fallen was visible, and for a moment, he thought he saw Diaz standing there, his figure faint and shimmering. "Diaz," Ethan whispered. Torres grabbed his arm. "Don't look back. It's over." But, as the chopper flew away, the jungle seemed to shift. The trees twisted, forming grotesque faces that stared up at them, and the laughter of the phantom children echoed in their ears. When they reached the safety of the base, Ethan and Torres were debriefed, their story met with skeptical looks and hushed whispers, but neither of them cared. Weeks later, Ethan found a small doll made of sticks and vines in his bunk. It bore a striking resemblance to Diaz. He burned it immediately, but the next morning, it was back. If you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel, Mystical Tales, so you won't miss out on more eerie and thrilling tales in the future. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.